the first time I asked my girlfriend where our missing $42,000 had gone. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not the kind people use when they're caught off guard. She laughed like I just asked the dumbest question she'd ever heard. For a second, I actually wondered if I'd missed something. Maybe there was another account. Maybe the banking app had glitched. Maybe I really was overreacting. Less than 24 hours later, we were having dinner with her parents when my phone started vibrating across the table. I glanced at the screen. First National Bank. I almost ignored it. Then I noticed the caller ID underneath. Branch manager. I stepped outside to answer. The woman on the other end didn't waste a second. Mr. Carter, I don't think you know who actually authorized the $42,000 withdrawal. I turned toward the dining room window. Emily was inside laughing with her parents like it was any other Saturday night. She hadn't looked worried once. Not when I asked about the money. Not when I called the bank. Not even now. That was the moment I realized the missing money wasn't the biggest problem. The person I trusted most genuinely believed I'd stop asking questions before I ever found the truth. 3 days earlier, Emily and I had spent almost 3 years building that savings account. Every tax refund, every overtime shift, every freelance consulting project I picked up on weekends, every vacation we postponed, every unnecessary purchase we talked ourselves out of. That account wasn't just money. It was the down payment on the house we'd spent months dreaming about. On Tuesday morning, I logged into our banking app to check whether my latest client payment had cleared. The balance loaded. I frowned. I refreshed the page. Then I refreshed it again. The number stayed exactly the same. I wasn't looking at a small mistake. $42,000 was gone. Not pending. Not on hold. Gone. I clicked into the transaction history. One withdrawal. $42,000. Completed. 3 days earlier. I checked the account number twice to make sure I hadn't accidentally opened the wrong profile. I hadn't. For nearly 5 minutes, I just sat there staring at the screen. My first thought wasn't that Emily had done something wrong. Honestly, she wasn't even on my list of possibilities. I assumed someone had hacked the account, or the bank had made a processing error, or maybe there was some kind of fraud alert that hadn't reached us yet. Every explanation sounded more reasonable than believing someone I loved had moved our savings without saying a word. I didn't call her immediately. I didn't accuse her. I didn't panic. I told myself there had to be a simple explanation. So I waited until she came home. Around 6:30, I heard her car pull into the driveway. She walked inside carrying 2 bags of Thai takeout and smiled the way she always did after work. Perfect timing, she said. I was starving. I smiled back. At least, I tried to. As she set the food on the kitchen counter, I closed my laptop and looked at her. Hey, can I ask you something? She looked up without the slightest hint that anything was wrong. Sure. I took a slow breath. What happened to the $42,000 in our savings account? She didn't answer. She looked at me for 2 seconds. Then she laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not the kind people use to ease an awkward moment. It was the kind of laugh that makes you feel ridiculous for asking a perfectly reasonable question. Oh my God, she said, shaking her head. You actually scared me. I frowned. What? I thought something serious had happened. It did. She rolled her eyes and started unpacking the takeout containers. Daniel, it's just money. I stared at her. It's $42,000. $42,000, she corrected without even looking at me. I know. So why are you questioning me like I'm some criminal? That wasn't what I'd asked. I'm asking where it went. She sighed dramatically. You really keep track of every single dollar. No, I keep track of our future. That made her stop for a second. Then she shrugged. Relax. Everything's under control. I waited. She didn't explain. No receipts. No paperwork. No bank statement. Just silence. I tried one more time. So, what was the money used for? She picked up her fork. You worry too much. I asked a simple question, and I gave you a simple answer. No, you avoided it. Her expression changed immediately. I can't believe this. What? You don't trust me? There it was. Within 2 minutes. The conversation had somehow become about my trust instead of the missing money. I rubbed my forehead. This isn't about trust. It obviously is. If you trusted me, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. I looked at her for a long moment. I would have answered if you asked me where $42,000 went. She laughed again. You always make everything bigger than it is. That sentence stayed with me, because nothing about $42,000 felt small. The rest of dinner was painfully normal. She talked about work, her coworker, a funny customer, weekend plans. It was like the conversation we'd just had never happened. I barely touched my food. Every few minutes, I caught myself looking at her. Not because I thought she was lying, because I couldn't understand why she wasn't concerned. If our positions had been reversed, if she'd found $42,000 missing, I would have been on the phone with the bank before she finished asking. Emily never even asked to see the transaction. Later that night, I tried again. She was lying in bed scrolling through her phone. I sat on the edge of the mattress. I'm not accusing you of anything. She didn't look up. I know. I just need to understand what happened. You already know. No, I don't. She sighed loudly and locked her phone. I moved the money. I blinked. Where? I'll explain later. When? When there's actually something to explain. I frowned. There already is. She smiled like she was talking to a child. Daniel, you overthink everything. You always have. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Confusion. Because she still hadn't answered the question. She'd simply found another way to avoid it. The next morning, I called First National Bank during my lunch break. I wasn't trying to report fraud. I honestly hoped the representative would tell me there had been some harmless mistake. After verifying my identity, she pulled up the account. I can confirm the withdrawal was authorized. So it wasn't flagged as fraud. No, sir. My stomach tightened. Can you tell me who authorized it? I'm sorry, I can't discuss those details over the phone. So the money wasn't stolen. No. It appears to have been processed normally. I thanked her and ended the call. That answer should have reassured me. Instead, it made me even more uneasy. Because if the bank believed everything was normal, someone with legal access had moved our savings. That afternoon, I texted Emily. Can we stop by the bank together after work? She replied less than a minute later. Emily, seriously. A second message followed. Emily, you're becoming obsessive. I looked at the screen for several seconds. Obsessive. That was the second time she'd made me feel guilty. For asking about money we'd spent nearly 3 years saving. Looking back, that text was probably the biggest red flag. Not because of what she called me, because she still hadn't answered the question. And somehow, I was beginning to wonder if I was the one doing something wrong. By Saturday evening, Emily acted like nothing had happened. She joked around while getting ready, played music in the car, even stopped for my favorite coffee on the way to her parents' house. If I hadn't seen the missing balance with my own eye, the sliding glass door clicked shut behind me. The laughter from the dining room instantly faded into the background. I answered the phone. Hello, Mr. Carter. Yes, this is Linda Harris from First National Bank. We spoke briefly earlier this week. I remember. Her voice was calm, professional, but something about it immediately made my stomach tighten. I apologize for calling during dinner, she said, but after reviewing your account this afternoon, we found something I believe you should know before Monday. I leaned against the patio railing. What is it? She paused. The $42,000 withdrawal was authorized. I already knew that. Yes, but the authorization process was modified less than 24 hours before the transfer. I frowned. What do you mean, modified? When your joint account was opened, any withdrawal over $25,000 required approval from both account holders. I know. That requirement was removed. The words didn't register at first. It was removed. Yes. I looked through the glass door. Emily was laughing with her mother. She looked completely relaxed, like she'd never worried about the missing money for even a second. I lowered my voice. I never approved changing the account. I'm aware that's what you told us. So who did? I'm afraid I can't discuss that over the phone. My pulse was racing now. Then why are you calling me? Because the authorization document contains information we'd like you to review in person. What kind of information? I'm not comfortable discussing it until we've verified your identity. I closed my eyes for a second. So this isn't just routine paperwork. No, sir. It isn't. The line went quiet. Finally, she added, I recommend coming to the branch first thing Monday morning. I'll be there. The call ended. For several seconds, I just stood there staring into the dark backyard. 3 days ago, I thought the biggest problem was missing money. Now I wasn't even sure I knew who had access to it. When I walked back inside, everyone looked up. Emily smiled. Everything okay? I pulled my chair out. The bank wants to see me Monday. Her smile barely changed. Oh, about what? Her father asked. Emily answered before I could. Probably paperwork. Her mother laughed. I swear banks make everything complicated. Emily nodded. They really do. I looked at her. She never once asked what the manager had actually said. Not once. Instead, she cut another piece of steak and changed the subject. For the rest of dinner, I barely heard anyone talking. I couldn't stop replaying one sentence. The authorization process was modified. Someone had changed our account. Someone had signed paperwork. And somehow, Emily didn't seem surprised. The drive home was unusually quiet. Normally, Emily filled silence without even trying. She'd complain about traffic, talk about work, ask what movie we should watch. That night, she stared out the passenger window almost the entire way home. About 10 minutes into the drive, I finally spoke. Can I ask you something? She didn't turn toward me. You usually do. The bank manager said someone changed the authorization rules on our account. She crossed her arms. So, did you know about that? She let out a slow sigh. Seriously, I'm asking. And I'm wondering why you're acting like this is some criminal investigation. I kept my eyes on the road. I'm trying to understand. You're trying to interrogate me. No, I'm trying to understand why something changed without me knowing. She shook her head. I honestly don't know what you want from me. The truth. She laughed quietly. There you go again. Again what? Making everything sound dramatic. I glanced at her. I'm talking about $42,000. And I'm telling you everything is under control. I waited. She didn't explain. She never explained. She just expected me to stop asking. By the time we got home, I'd made one decision. I wasn't going to argue anymore. Not because I believed her, because every conversation, somehow, ended the same way. I asked a question. She questioned my motives. I asked again. She questioned my trust. By the end, I was defending myself instead of getting an answer. I wasn't going to do that anymore. Monday morning, I arrived at First National Bank 15 minutes before my appointment. Linda Harris was already waiting. She shook my hand and led me into a private office. A thin blue folder sat neatly on the conference table. She pushed it toward me. "I think you'll understand why I wanted you to come in." I opened it. The first document was titled Authorization Change Request. The second I looked at it, my stomach dropped. There were two signatures, Emily's and mine, except mine wasn't mine. I looked up. "That's not my signature." Linda nodded. "We didn't believe it was." She handed me another document. "This is the signature card you completed when the account was originally opened." The difference was obvious. One signature flowed naturally. The other looked stiff, forced, like someone had practiced copying it. I looked back at Linda. "So someone forged my name. We can't make that determination, but we can say the signatures are materially inconsistent." I leaned back in my chair. For the first time, this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Someone had signed a legal banking document pretending to be me. Linda slid one final page across the table. "There's something else." I looked down. It was a transaction summary. $42,000 hadn't been withdrawn as cash. It had been electronically transferred to another financial institution. My heart started pounding. "Can you tell me where it went?" "I'm afraid I can't until the investigation is complete." I nodded slowly. Then I asked the question that had been bothering me since Saturday night. "Who brought in the paperwork?" Linda looked at me for a long moment. "I can't answer that directly." She paused. "But I can tell you this. The person who submitted it appeared extremely confident that everything had been properly authorized." Those words stayed with me. Extremely confident. Not nervous. Not uncertain. Confident. Almost. Like they never expected anyone to question it. I drove home in complete silence. Halfway there, Emily called. I let it ring. Then she called again. And again. Finally, I answered. "So?" Her voice sounded almost cheerful. "Did the bank calm you down?" I closed my eyes for a second. "No." Silence. Then she asked, "What do you mean?" I answered quietly. "I know someone forged my signature." She didn't say a single word. Not even a breath. And for the first time since this started, the silence wasn't mine. It was hers. The silence on the phone lasted almost 5 seconds. It didn't sound like someone who'd been falsely accused. It sounded like someone trying to decide what to say next. Finally, Emily spoke. "You're serious?" "I am." "I don't know what the bank told you." "I know enough." Another pause. Then her voice hardened. "I think you're making a huge mistake." "I hope I am. But someone forged my signature." She exhaled sharply. "So now what?" "Now I want the truth. I've already told you everything." "No. You've told me almost nothing." She didn't answer. Instead, she quietly said, "We'll talk when you get home." The line went dead. I drove home slower than usual. Not because I was upset, because I kept replaying the past week in my head. The missing money. Her laughter. Calling me obsessive. Telling me I didn't trust her. Suddenly, none of those conversations felt random anymore. Every one of them had pushed me away from the same question. Where did the money actually go? When I pulled into the driveway, Emily's car was already there. She was sitting on the front porch, not crying, not angry, just waiting. As soon as I stepped out of my truck, she stood up. "We need to talk." I nodded. "I agree." Inside the house, neither of us sat down. She stayed near the kitchen island. I remained by the dining table. The distance between us felt much larger than a few feet. She broke the silence first. "Did the bank accuse me?" "No. They're investigating forged paperwork." She immediately folded her arms. "So you think I forged your signature?" "I think someone did." "And who else would it be?" "I don't know." "Then stop looking at me like that." "I'm looking at you because every answer keeps leading back here." Her jaw tightened. "I can't believe this." "I can." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I've asked the same question for 6 days. You've been accusing me for 6 days." "I've been asking." "You've been judging." I shook my head. "No, I've been waiting." She walked over to the counter and grabbed a glass of water. Her hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. She looked more frustrated than nervous. "You know what hurts the most?" she asked. "What?" "That you believed strangers before you believed me." I looked at her quietly. I believed documents. I believed my own signature. I believed the fact that $42,000 disappeared without a conversation. She slammed the glass onto the counter. "I was trying to protect my family." The words came out so fast. I almost missed them. I stared at her. "What did you just say?" Her eyes widened. For the first time all week. She looked like she wished she could take her words back. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked, "What does your family have to do with our savings?" She looked toward the floor. "My brother." I waited. He was about to lose his construction business. "How much did he need?" She swallowed. 42,000. The room became completely silent. "So," I said carefully, "you transferred our entire house fund to your brother." "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like." She looked up. "He promised he'd pay it back within 3 months." "You didn't answer my question." She closed her eyes. "I didn't think you'd understand." I nodded slowly. "No, I don't think you believed you needed my permission." She didn't deny it. That silence told me more than anything she'd said all week. She hadn't made a desperate decision. She'd made a confident one. She genuinely believed I'd eventually accept it, just like I'd accepted every smaller act of disrespect before. And in that moment, the missing money stopped being the biggest betrayal. The biggest betrayal was realizing she'd stopped seeing me as an equal long before the money ever left our account. I looked at her for what felt like a full minute, not because I was waiting for another explanation, because I was trying to accept that the person standing in front of me had already made every important decision without me. Finally, I asked the only question that still mattered. "Did you sign my name?" Emily didn't answer. Instead, she whispered, "I didn't have another choice." I shook my head. "No, you had dozens of choices. You could have asked me. You could have told me your brother needed help. You could have let us decide together." Her eyes filled with tears. "You would have said no." "Maybe. But that would have been our decision." She looked down. "I couldn't let him lose everything. And you were willing to risk us instead." Silence. "I never thought you'd find out." Those 7 words hurt more than anything else she'd said. Not because they were cruel, because they were honest. She hadn't trusted me enough to ask. She'd simply assumed I'd never know. I slowly picked up my car keys. She immediately looked up. Where are you going? I'm leaving. Daniel, I'm not angry anymore. That surprised her. She took a step closer. Then stay. I looked at her calmly. I spent the last week trying to figure out where $42,000 went. I paused. It turns out what I actually lost was trust. She grabbed my wrist. Please. It was one mistake. I gently pulled my hand away. No. It was hundreds of small decisions. The money was just the first one I couldn't ignore. I rented a small furnished apartment across town. It wasn't much. A couch, a folding table, 2 coffee mugs, an air mattress for the first few nights. It was quieter than the house Emily and I had shared. Oddly, that silence felt peaceful instead of lonely. For the first time in days, I slept through the night. Over the next several weeks, the bank completed its investigation. The handwriting analysis confirmed what I'd already known. The signature on the authorization request wasn't mine. Once Emily realized the bank had frozen the remaining records and requested supporting documentation, the truth came out quickly. Her brother admitted he'd accepted the money knowing she hadn't discussed it with me. He insisted he believed she'd eventually tell me. Between him, Emily, and their attorney, they agreed to repay every dollar through a formal settlement. The bank reversed the authorization changes, restored my account protections, and closed the investigation without criminal charges after both sides reached a civil resolution. Some people later asked why I didn't push for prosecution. The answer was simple. I wasn't looking for revenge. The investigation had already given me the only thing I'd actually needed. The truth. Almost 3 months later, Emily asked if we could meet one last time. We chose a small coffee shop halfway between our apartments. She looked tired, not because she'd lost money, because she'd lost certainty. After a few minutes, she quietly said, I keep replaying that first night. The night you asked where the money went. I nodded. If I just told you the truth. She couldn't finish the sentence. I answered for her. We probably would have had a chance. She looked at me. So why doesn't it feel fixable now? I stirred my coffee before answering. Because the money wasn't what broke us. She frowned. It was the week after. You laughed. You called me obsessive. You made me feel guilty for asking about our future. You watched me question myself instead of telling me the truth. She wiped a tear from her cheek. I honestly believed you'd forgive me. I know. You always had. That was the first completely honest thing she'd said since all of this started. She hadn't relied on my trust. She'd relied on my pattern. She believed I'd explain away her choices the same way I always had. This time, I didn't. We never got back together. A few months later, I bought a smaller townhouse. Not the dream home we'd planned. Just a place that felt honest. I started accepting weekend consulting projects again. Spent more time with friends I'd slowly drifted away from. Stopped apologizing for asking reasonable questions. Life didn't suddenly become exciting. It became calm. Looking back, people assume this story is about $42,000. It isn't. Money can be earned again. Trust can sometimes be rebuilt. But respect is different. Once someone becomes comfortable making you question your own reality instead of answering a simple question, the relationship is already standing on borrowed time. The missing money wasn't the moment I lost my girlfriend. It was the moment I finally realized I'd been losing my voice for much longer. And the day I stopped chasing explanations, I finally found something far more valuable than $42,000. I found my self-respect.